In this video, I'll cover reinforcement learning for robotics and the entire pipeline from modeling, training, to deploying. You might think it's a straightforward process that goes from modeling, training, to deployment. But actually, many times you actually have to iterate between the different stages. That's why you should understand each step of your pipeline so you know exactly what to modify when your RL controller is not working. We'll cover the first step, which is modeling. That entails MuJoCo simulation, CAD, STL files, XML, MJCF files, frames, motor parameters, and control position versus torque. And then we'll dive into the second phase, which is training. We'll cover Gymnasium, policy, neural networks, PPO, domain randomization, episodes, rewards, states, observations, termination, step, reset, and finally model weights. And then we'll finish up with deployment, talk about Onyx models, sensors, real hardware considerations, action scaling, control loop, and how to evaluate your results. By the end, you should understand all the terminologies and how they're connected to each other. And even though I'll be explaining with a simple system like the rotary inverted pendulum, these same concepts can expand to more complicated systems like quadruped robots and humanoid robots. And if you want to have a deeper understanding in some of the topics that I talk about, make sure to come here to join and check out my Robotics Builders membership for some of the behind-the-scene videos. So let's start off by talking about modeling. So for modeling, you need to first create your CAD model. So the CAD model, you could create it using any sort of software you want. Me personally, I chose SolidWorks because that's the one I'm most familiar with, but you can also use things like Onshape or FreeCAD. But the point of creating your CAD model is so that once you have that, you could export it to a STL file. And the STL file is going to allow you to plug it into your XML file, which you could then render in MuJoCo. So you can see right here, this is my model in MuJoCo. And you can see right here on the side, you have different options for the control. So you could set a torque and make it start spinning. And we have like the different motors too that you can actuate. Another pretty good alternative to MuJoCo is Isaac Sim from NVIDIA. My personal reason for choosing MuJoCo is mostly because it's more lightweight and easier to get started. And MuJoCo has some of their official documentations here. I'll leave a link in the video description for you to check it out, but it's a good idea to use this as a reference because a lot of times ChatGPT may not know exactly which version you're dealing with, so you may have to end up referring to the documentation. So when you're dealing with MuJoCo file, they call it XML or also the MJCF. These are both names that they call it, but when you see the extension, typically you're going to see it's a .xml file. So this right here is the general structure of an XML file. You have your MuJoCo model, which you name your name of your model, and then you have your gravity set up here, and then we have assets, world body, and actuator. So for the STL files for visualization, it normally goes under your assets. So the STL files that you generate from SolidWorks, for example, will come right here. And then to define the links, this is where it goes under the world body section. So you want to define your links like link 0, link 1, and link 2. And then in between the links, you have your joints. So the joints specify where the actuators are. Typically, you're going to choose something like type hinge, and then the axis is the axis that is going to be rotating. So these steps are very important for you to confirm because if any of your directions are off, then some of your simulation will be off. And to specify the control method, you typically will have two options. So the first one is going to be the torque mode. This is where you have the name motor name equals motor 1, joint equals joint 1. And then if you're trying to do position mode, you're going to use position name equals motor and then the joint. So these are the two main options that you have in MuJoCo. If you want to have any custom controllers, then you could wrap it around the main output of your torque and implement whichever controller you choose. So to actually control some of the coordinate frames to make sure they line up, this is where you want to check out the line where it says body name. And then you have your position and quaternion. These are the things that's going to align the axes, and you should check the rotation and see if they visually match up with what you expect. And then as for the motor parameters, this is where you could set things like the friction loss, damping, armature. So these are very important. That's based off of the parameters on your actuator. So sometimes you may have to run some tests to figure it out, or if their data sheet is very accurate, you could pull that directly from their data sheets. And you can see right here for the geometry too, you can also specify the density, which will affect some of your mass properties for the links that you're dealing with. Now, if you're trying to figure out how to match some of your frames and are new to concepts like quaternions or rotation matrices, you could check out these two videos. I'll leave a link in the video description. but also go into more details on like how to match your MuJoCo model to your real model and how to set up a custom robot. I go through step by step in these videos, so you could check it out over there. Now, next step is training. So training is typically done with our PPO policy. So this right here in the green, this is our PPO policy, which is essentially a neural network. So the neural network is going to have weights that control how the neural network behaves. And the whole process of training is to figure out exactly what these weights are. So there's a lot of steps involved here, and we're going to go into detail on every block that you see in this diagram. But the idea is this. So we have a gymnasium environment. So this is like a virtual environment where not the same gym as where you're lifting weights, but this is the environment where the model repeatedly tries to execute a specific task that you tell it to do until it reaches a final goal. So the idea is you create a gymnasium environment, which is going to be a place where you put in your MuJoCo model. And this is where you could set things like different observations that you can read, like position or velocity. You set a condition for when it should stop. You need to give it a reward, which is something that will give it more points for doing something right or subtract points for doing something wrong. And then we have a reset, which is how do you know when you should start over and keep trying again. So after you're done with this whole training process, which you can specify how many times to keep trying, you output the trained model weights, which is saved onto your computer. So when do you actually use these weights? You use it during inference. This is where you're actually running your model using the trained weights that you figured out from the training process. So you take your weights, plug it into your neural network, and then you call the step to see how your model behaves in your simulation. So some of the observations and the reset, termination, some of those settings will be the same as what you set in your training process. So what exactly is a gymnasium environment? So concretely, it's going to be a class that you inherit from gym.environment. So you import your gymnasium libraries, and the core of your environment is to have the function calls that we saw in the diagram, right? So we have our get observation, get reward, reset, step, render, and close. Now for the observations, you have a couple different options. So for joint data, we could have things like position, velocity, current, or torques. For the IMU data, you can have something like orientation, angular velocity, or linear acceleration. For the end effector data, EE, you can have the pose, velocity, or the force and torque. And then for other data, you can have things like the object position, the error, time, and images. So all of these observations, you could choose a combination of these to see what works best for your setup. Now, when you're actually working with the observation inside your function, you're going to pull the data from MuJoCo using the self.data calls. So here I'm getting the position and velocity. You put all that data inside the observation array, and then you return it. So for the rewards, you have a combination of bonuses and penalty. So for the bonus, you could have as many up to n bonuses and penalty up to m penalty. So when you add them all up, you could weigh the different contributions for each one to see which one you want to have more impact on. Now for bonuses, there's a lot of different things you could count as a bonus. You could do something like position tracking. You could do upright orientation. You could take the velocity tracking. You could have a survival or staying balance or a task completion. So all of these things you could express using mathematical expressions, and you could play around with different versions of these to see which one gives you the best results. And for the penalty, you could have something like the control effort penalty, velocity penalty, action smoothness penalty, collision penalty, or joint limit penalty. So even though I went through 5 of each, you could technically have an endless of combinations as possible, or even different variants, as long as your imagination is creative. Now, the way the reward is actually implemented, you would have a function called getReward. And here, again, you would get some of the data from your MuJoCo. And you take that data, and then you could set it up inside your equations that we talked about. So here, we're looking at a height and a velocity penalty. So our total reward could be height minus velocity penalty. Now, the process of reward shaping and figuring out the right reward is quite a complicated process. And there's a lot of trial and error involved. So that's why I documented my entire process to make my rotary inverted pendulum work. And the main thing you would get out of it is my thought process in how do I decide on what data I see? And based on the data I see, how do I decide what action to take? So I go through that process iteratively to show you exactly how I think about the problem so that you can take that and then apply it to another problem like humanoid robots. Now for the reset, this is where you want to start over your episode. So typically when you reach a termination criteria, this is where you would call the reset. And the reset is basically telling your program where is your robot starting now. So you could have some random positions, you could have initial starting position or velocity. You could have a lot of different things based on what you think will work and based on some of the results that you see. So after you set some of these, you would call the MJ forward, which is going to tell your model to go there, and then you could reset some of the counters that you have. Now for the step function, this is where you're telling your model what to do at every iteration of your control loop. So here we have some torque that we're setting. We also scale it, and then you would pass it into your MuJoCo model. And then from there, you would call the MuJoCo step function, which will actually actuate your robot. And then from there, you want to get the observation and rewards, and then you have your termination criteria, and then you return that. So some of these code snippets that I've been showing you are simplified versions. When you actually implement it, you're going to find that you have to add some complexities to actually make it work. That's where I go into detail in my document. Now, a very important part is the domain randomization. So this is where we want to vary parameters like your mass inertia, your friction dampening, your actuator strength, sensor noise, and latency. So depending on how well your model can zero-shot transfer onto hardware, you may need to play around with some of these parameters to see how to make your model more robust, because a lot of times in simulation and hardware, some of these estimations will not be exactly the same. So to actually implement it in code, you could call like a reset model function. And then inside of here, you could randomize the mass, randomize the damping, randomize the torque scaling, and so on, right? So once you do that, you could call it and then return the observations. So when you do domain randomization, you don't actually have to go in and modify your SOLIDWORKS parts or anything complicated like that, because you could just do everything programmatically like I've explained right here. So we finished explaining everything that's inside our gym environment, which has our get observation, get reward, reset, step, render, and close. So all of these is what makes up your gym environment, but how do you actually use it? This is where your training script comes in. So inside your training script, we're going to be using the stable baseline PPO calls. And then right here, you can see we import our MuJoCo model. So this is the XML path that we're getting. And you take the path, you pass it into your rotary pendulum environment that we've created. This is where our gym environment comes in. And then you could choose how many environments you have, basically how many things you want to run in parallel of the same instance. And then you create your PPO model using the MLP policy. You could set some learning rates. You could play around with this to see what works best for you. And then the main function call that does all the training is very simple. It's just one line that says model.learn, and you set your total time steps, and you could play around with that number to see what gives you the best results. And then finally, the last call is to just save your model so that you can use it during inference. Now in practice, when you're training, it's going to look like this. It's going to print things in the terminal, and you're going to see the eval, time, train, and the different progress that it's making over time. So some of this, depending on what PC you have, could take a couple minutes to a couple of hours. But this is really what training looks like in practice, which can be quite a boring and dry experience, but you just have to wait for the results to finish and see how well your training process did, and then refine based off of your results. So typically you could look at some graphs like this to see your evaluation performance, which would plot your reward over the function of their total time steps. And you can see whether or not your performance was converging over time. But the thing is, sometimes maybe your reward graph might look promising, but then you see some of your performance when you actually run the inference where it actually doesn't swing up or get stuck, because maybe your reward structure was wrong and it was reaching your reward. So it was actually probably how you architected your reward. So you have to actually visually and check the performance, because sometimes the data is only half the story. So this is why I say it's a very iterative process. You might have to deploy your model, whether that's in simulation or hardware, go back to the training process, see if you set it up correctly, and kind of keep repeating that process over and over again. Now for deployment, specifically on hardware, is going to consist of a few extra steps, right? So we have our train model weights that go into our policy or our neural network, which is our PPO. And the middle part, this is the new part that's going to be added. It's going to be a dummy gym environment that we're going to be making. So This is what's going to handle things like the observation formatting, your action scaling and clipping, and different things like that. Because sometimes when you go from simulation to hardware, maybe your motor has a different setting that it's accepting. Like, for example, the current that it's reading, maybe in simulation is taking a torque. So you might have to apply some scaling factor to that. And maybe some of your sensor data, the raw data might be noisy. You might need to calibrate it. So in the real world, there's a lot of different things that you have to consider. So when you created the gym environment previously that we saw, is still relying on that gym environment, but is creating a dummy one, which just does some of the formatting and scaling for you. So that's the middle layer that you see. And then on the right, this is your actual hardware system. So here we have like an actuator that has encoders. So you're going to be taking those encoder values and then passing it back and receiving motor commands. In this case, we're taking current. And a very, very, very important part about hardware deployment is going to be safety. So set up your e-stops, set up your software safety limits, because on hardware, unlike simulation, in simulation, you can make it do wild and crazy things and no one's going to get hurt. But in hardware, if you screw up, then you're probably going to hurt yourself or maybe burn down your house. So you got to take the safety part very seriously and don't skip any steps. Now, when dealing with hardware, there's a lot of different types of sensors. In our case, we're just dealing with encoders, but you could have things like camera images, IMU data, force torque sensors, and so on. So each one needs to be handled accordingly to figure out how to get a clean data or reliable data. And so a lot of real world considerations, right? We talk about calibration, communication interface. Does it use EtherCAT, SPI, CAN, whatever communication interface, you need to figure that out. You might need to convert your units. There might be noise you have to filter. There might be timing and synchronization issues. There could be latency. There could be missing or bad data. Maybe you need to swap out a different sensor. And that was actually a problem I had when I did my project. I had to actually swap out my encoder because my initial encoder reading implementation wasn't working. So there's a million things that could go wrong when you deploy on hardware. So you have to go through that entire checklist to see exactly everything is working as you expect. So for my test I did, I ran it on my Linux PC, but if you want to deploy it on a MCU or some smaller hardware, then you might need to convert your model to an Onyx model. So to do that is pretty simple. You could use the Onyx policy class here, set up your for call here, and then call it, run the eval, and then you just call your torch.onyx.export and it should export your model into Onyx version. You have to check a lot of the scaling to make sure it's scaled properly. So make sure that the conversion was successful. Now, as for the main control loop, you might do something like read hardware data, create the observation, run the predict to actually figure out the actions you want to send. And then from the actions, you might convert it to hardware actions. And then from the hardware actions, you could send it to your actual hardware. So this right here is some of the results I did for my hardware deployment. And you can see I tried to actually add water to make it have extra disturbance, and it still worked out pretty well. I actually didn't do too much domain randomization for extra masses, and it still worked out. And you can see here I'm tapping it too, and it's also responding to my disturbances. I ended up giving it even further test to see how long it could run before it fell, and it ran for almost 4 full minutes. Now, your model is probably not going to work the first time. I had to try over and over and over and over again until I got my model to work. So you can consider trying to iterate on the following things like the modeling parameter, the sensor data integrity, the training steps and duration, your reward structure, the termination, the episode reset, and all your observations. So a lot of these things will impact your results, and it's going to be an art. But the key thing is you have to understand how to look at your data and interpret it and then make the right decision after that. And that's exactly why I put together this guide here to go through that same thought process that I went through so that you can learn based off of my experience using this setup. And if you want to have a deeper understanding in some of the topics that I talk about, make sure to come here to join and check out my Robotics Builders membership for some of the behind the scene videos.